Welcome back to another episode of the Around the Block podcast from Coinbase. I'm your host, Catherine Wu.
And I'm Justin Mart.
J-Mart, what are we talking about this week?
I think this is kind of an exciting but challenging topic to address. We want to talk about risk in crypto. Talk about all the different ways, you hear about hacks in the news, you hear about protocols getting exploited, you hear about people losing money. And I think it's exciting because it actually is indicative of some of the opportunity in crypto, but it's also scary, right?
Yes. And the more boring part is like, how should we think about de-risking ourselves? Because, there are steps and there are best practices. And that might seem boring, but I do think it's fair to actually address a lot of the hacks and the headlines, because I do think actually, just like anecdotally, people sometimes hesitate to take jobs at crypto companies because they're like, oh, but I don't know, hear about these hacks. I don't know if this is a good sign for the industry. And I've actually had to talk to someone this week to convince her on taking a job at a really, really cool, actually, NFT company, because she was reading headlines and got a little bit scared about making this move. So I actually think it's pretty timely to talk about this.
Yeah, it's also true if people are playing around in crypto and they're scared to do anything because they're worried they're going to lose their money. So there's a lot of kind of consternation and worry out there. And I feel like it's important for us to address it, to talk from, in a sober manner about what these risks really are. And as you say, the takeaway to me is, how can people protect themselves and how should they be thinking about the risks that do exist in crypto?
Hopefully it will shed more light on just, what are the inner workings of a hack and, kind of what we can do. Both of the things that are inside our control and the things that are outside of control, like how to actually think about risk.
Yeah, and maybe to your point, there was a rather significant recent event that occurred. If you've heard about this in the news before, the Wormhole bridge. Crypto's got funny names, right? But basically this protocol, this project that was bridging assets from one ecosystem to another, in this case from Ethereum to Solana, was exploited. Somebody managed to take advantage of that bridge and run away, at least as of the time that we're talking here, they managed to run away with $250 million in value. So we're going to get into that a little bit, talk about kind of the anatomy of a hack, but that's just one type of hack. As you mentioned, there are many other things that could go wrong. We want to kind of give a comprehensive overview on how to stay safe and what these different, hacks look like.
Yeah.
So I thought it'd be interesting, actually, if we just kind of provide a groundwork on why people are playing around in DeFi at all or in crypto at all, given that hacks occur. There's a challenge here, but maybe it's just important to kind of reset and remember, hey, why are people playing around in crypto to begin with? So what do you think?
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons people are excited about crypto. And this is you want to participate in something that is really exciting. And there's a bunch of ways to participate in crypto, right? There is the NFT side. And so that's the more social stuff. And we've covered that before, or it's about owning an NFT. That's also things we've covered before on the podcast. It's about participating in new financial products, being on the forefront of new financial innovations. And, it's about yield, which is that when you participate in crypto, oftentimes you're getting insane APRs that you're just not getting at your bank, right? So there are a lot of reasons to participate. There are a lot of reasons to be excited. However, as with everything that's exciting, there are always downsides and risks. And so I think today we should break it down in two types of risks. And I think I like to think about it as the risks that are in your control and the risks that are outside of your control.
So let's kind of talk about each of them together, right? There's risks and hacks that can occur, but really you could have avoided it. What are some examples of those things?
Okay, so breaking it down, right? Things that are within your control is very much things that we covered in our crypto security podcast with Mark from Coinbase. And that's very much just what are best practices, right? So that includes, storing, figuring out where to store your own assets. That's how do you watch out for common phishing scams? And this happens in emails too, right? We made that joke about the email about I'm a Nigerian prince and I'm going to give you $50 million and you just have to give me your social security. That also happens in crypto land, right? When things sound too good to be true, maybe think about it. There was this big weird trend last year where people were impersonating Elon Musk, giving away crypto, and people were just sending stuff that was probably not information you should have sent and got hacked that way. So these are things that I think are a little bit more within your control, and there is a realm of best practices in which you can de-risk yourself from not falling into these more common, either it's phishing scams or just knowing where to store your crypto securely.
I'm not sure about you, but I, for one, am always a little bit perplexed and shocked that the Nigerian prince scam is still around, right? Like, and it's kind of a call out to the fact that, hey, the internet came around and suddenly scammers realized they could take advantage of this by talking to a bunch of people and pretending they're the Nigerian prince. And
Yeah.
what, 30
Well,
years later,
actually,
we're
they're
still
pretending
falling.
to be Elon Musk now. Elon Musk actually has replaced the Nigerian
It's
prince.
apparently a little more believable, right? Somehow, yeah.
Yes.
Some very wealthy person wants to give you money. Yay. No, too good to be true. Don't fall for it. But it's kind of regurgitation of stuff we've seen before. There's not necessarily anything super novel or new in this category of risks. Again, if Elon wants to give you money, don't do it because it's too good to be true. That's common
Yes.
sense, right?
But by the way, I just want to say, and this is actually embarrassing, and I was going to take this to my grave actually,
I wanna
but
hear it.
I actually did fall for a phishing scam last week.
Whoa. Okay.
Which is literally like, it's so embarrassing that actually, like, I don't know why I'm telling you this, but it was in Discord. Like, I had joined a new group and like someone DM'd me and like, I don't know, I think just like in my excitement, I was like, oh my God, like I just joined this group. The official moderator is DMing me. Like, they're telling me where to go to like actually claim it. And I was like, oh yeah, like great. And like, this is so dumb because like, as someone who's been in crypto, I thought I was smarter than this, but my point is like people fall for phishing scams. And like luckily for me, it wasn't a huge amount of money that I lost, but it still happens, you know? Like they
Yeah.
take advantage of like your excitement or your like just like intense emotions and you just like don't stop to think for 2 seconds.
Yeah. Maybe it's also just a lesson that, hey, if you did get hacked, you're not alone. And I think there
Yes.
I don't know, I'd ask you, did you feel like any sense of shame of like, oh my gosh, how could I be so stupid?
Intensely. I literally basically crawled into bed for the rest of the day because I was so embarrassed to even think about it. Now, every time I see the NFT project, I feel a deep sense of shame that like, oh my God, like and to be clear, by the way, it wasn't the project that scammed me. It was someone impersonating as an official moderator of the project.
Yeah, and maybe this is a little bit of a lesson that when you are excited about something, when there's money involved, when there's opportunity there, people can kind of lose their common sense a little bit. It's actually very common, right? Because again, your emotions are there, you're excited about it, and oh, this person says they're the moderator of a Discord, and you can trust them, and oh, they're just trying to help you, and then the next thing you know, oh my gosh, you lost your money.
Yeah, and I'm like, I don't want to get canceled for admitting that I fell for a scam as like someone who knows better and is sitting here giving advice, but I don't know. I just like
Frankly, you're not going to get canceled. This is a great point.
Everyone.
Yeah, it happens to everybody. And this is actually just even more of, I think it's an empathetic thing, right? It's like, look, you're not alone if it's happened to you, and don't be ashamed about it. But let's use this example as a way to learn from it. Can you actually tell us, like, how did they end up taking your money? What was the back end of this? What was the thing where you should have been like, oh, red flag, don't do this? What happened there?
Oh, such a good question. And playing it back, it's so obvious. So what happened was I joined a group. Someone who was impersonating the official like moderator of the group sent me a link like, hey, this is actually where you should go claim your NFTs. And I clicked on it and it actually took me to a page that looked very, very real, right? And there was a big button that just said like mint. And so I just, I put like, I'm not going to say how much money, but like put some money into the wallet and then I just hit the button and I thought it would give me the NFT. But what it actually is a button that disguises as a transfer button. So what I actually did was send my ETH into someone else's wallet.
Yes.
And it obviously didn't give me anything back. Now, of course, like in my confusion, I went back to the page and then I tried to click on like tabs that would have taken me to other pages and realized it was like a dead link. So it was just, honestly, they took me to a page that was dressed up really well. If you actually even took a second to even click into the other web pages, you would have realized it wasn't a real page.
So
that was not what I realized because I didn't take the 2 seconds to click around and like figure out if this was a real web page.
Yeah. So I guess this would be classically referred to as a phishing scam, right? Where
Yes,
they
I
made a
literally
website that
yes.
looked just like the real thing. And then somebody who purported to be a moderator, somebody in control sent you there, right? So maybe when we talk about best practice and how people can protect themselves, where they should use common sense, let's break this down, right? Because anytime you are clicking a button that will send money or perform an action out of your wallet, that's when you need to pause and ask yourself, does everything look legit? And frankly, your example here, you should double and triple check these things because there can be subtle differences that you need to look at and make sure it's all correct.
And you don't have to be tech savvy, right? Like, I mean, listen, like, let's not dwell on my mistake, but like, I could have taken this 2 seconds just to click on another button, just to verify, right? If you click the top button, does it take you to the home page? If you click like, about, does it actually take you to the about page? And if it's not, then like that should ring like some bells for you. So like you don't even need to be technical. You don't even need to understand how like the blockchain works. It's just like, does everything look right to you? Right.
Yep.
It literally it's 2 seconds. And you know, I could have saved myself some money and a lot of shame.
I think it's a great learning lesson there, right? So I'll say this, you know, I've been in crypto for a while. Even to this day, anytime that I want to push a button that's going to affect my assets or write a transaction to the blockchain or send money, I always pause. And I always go, okay, does the domain look correct? Do these parameters look correct? Do I know how I got here? Usually what I'll do, by the way, is I'll search or I'll make sure I'm on the official website. I'll double check the website very carefully, right? Because even for me, right, I need to make sure that I'm playing correctly and I haven't been sort of fished along the way. This might sound a little bit scary that you got to take these checks and precautions. And we're going to get into a little bit of like the state of the crypto industry a bit later in this podcast and wrap this up as far as like, okay, we're early in the space. We should expect things to be a little bit rougher on the edges sometimes, but we should also expect the industry to get better, mature over time, and figure out how to help consumers make sure they don't fall for these things.
Yes. But at the same time, when you're sending money anywhere, period, crypto or not, you should be checking. Like if I'm Venmoing somebody, you're doing the basic thing of like, is this the right Venmo, right? We've all done the mistake of like, we Venmo the wrong person and had to like beg the other person to send us back the money, right? And sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't, or maybe this is just me because I tend to do this a lot, I guess. But you should just check where you're sending your money.
It's common sense, frankly, right? But you know, when you're in the moment, it's actually a little bit harder to remember that because again, you're excited about it.
Now, okay, that's a wrap for the things that are within your control that takes maybe 3 to 5 seconds to verify. Now on to the things that are a little bit outside of your control and maybe like how we should think about that. So when we say risk, like especially taking risk in crypto that is outside your control, what we really mean is like, maybe this is a breakdown from the smart contract itself, right? So this is like a breakdown or a bug in the code itself. So this is obviously not something that you and I could do because as users, I don't have access to the code, right? I'm trusting the code. That's actually the whole point. So the things that are outside of my control that are actually really scary is where there's actually a bug in the code that causes it to be hacked later on down the line, right? And that's like very outside of my control. And this is what happened, by the way, with the big hack recently over Wormhole, the cross-chain bridge solution. Like someone basically, if you think about the bridge communication, you could think about it as like ways different blockchains talk to each other. And there's like a bridge that like bridges the two blockchains. And what happened really was that like the asset on its way going from one end of the bridge to another, it got hacked before it even got on the bridge.
Yeah.
That's like a high level explanation.
I think, yeah, you're certainly, the framing here is correct. As you say, this class of attacks, right? They're things that are outside of your control. So you pointed out one of them. One of them is smart contract hacks, where there's a bug in the code itself. Remember that crypto is basically programmable money. And that means that there are programs that control money. But guess what? Programs have bugs sometimes. And so we as an industry are trying to wrestle with this idea that, hey, these base protocols that we think are solid and secure and are doing the simple thing, there could be an exploit. And somebody could exploit that program and just take the money, kind of rug pull it, right? That is scary, right? The other thing that I would call out here too is if you're holding your money at an exchange, and if the exchange has poor security practices, maybe somebody gets into that exchange and manages to extract money that way. We've seen this in the past as well. We've seen both of these classes. But in both of these classes, you as a consumer are more or less participating in this ecosystem, have done nothing wrong. Your passwords are secure, you're checking for phishing scams, you're doing all the right things, and still the underlying protocol, the underlying exchange was hacked and the money was taken from you. As you say, it's a little bit scarier, but I think this is where we want to demystify it a little bit. We want to talk about how this happens and maybe provide a frame on why, in my opinion, it's not quite as scary as it might first appear.
Yeah, I think, things are outside of your control, but it doesn't mean all hope is lost. And I do think that both, there are good examples in the traditional world, which is that banks get robbed all the time, but people continue to put their money into banks, right? And I actually looked this statistic up because I was actually really curious. So I mean, whatever, maybe things on the internet aren't true, but anyways, I saw a stat that was basically like every year there are 3,000 to 4,000 bank robberies. Right? Like that's insane. And you hear about this. And then I was looking up the largest bank robberies in the world, blah, blah, blah. And they're in the hundreds of millions of dollars. So my whole point is just yeah, those are outside of your control too. You put your money in a bank and the bank gets robbed and, they get away with hundreds of millions of dollars, but you continue to put your money in a bank.
Yeah.
Now, what makes it less scary is banks have probably fortified their security. Maybe you feel better about insurance. There are ways that banks are doing that maybe make you more, feel like, okay, even though it happens, I still feel okay. So like, how do we translate now this to the crypto world?
Yeah, this is a great point, right? If I were to kind of take a step back and think about these two industries, first of all, the banking industry that's evolved and matured over the past 100 years or so, and crypto, which has been around for, 5 years, right? Well, the banking industry, well, man, Wells Fargo, right? The name was basically these guys on wagon back or whatever, transporting money, and they've got shotguns, right? That's Wells Fargo. That was the initial day of like, oh my gosh, we got to protect against fraud, right? And it's evolved. And today, we still do have, as you say, bank robberies, credit cards, right? They get stolen all the time. It happens all the time. But the difference is, well, the banks made it harder to get robbed. Credit cards made it easier to detect fraud. And by the way, when it does happen, consumers generally are not left holding the bag. There's a measure of insurance, there's a measure of protection. So the banking industry has 100 years on us. Crypto's been around for 5 years. We're nascent, but we're going down the same path. We will figure out how to make the protocols more and more secure, how to make sure that the underlying, smart contracts are not going to get exploited, or when they are, it's less frequent, less severe. We're figuring out best practices.
Yeah, well, like, I mean, let's talk about this a little bit, maybe in concrete terms. In the real world, in the non-crypto world, like, if the bank gets robbed, I still feel okay because there's FDIC insurance, so I know I'm insured up to a certain amount of money, right? So like, my loss is actually like kind of limited to like a certain amount. On the flip side, if my credit card gets stolen, I just call my bank. Like someone stole my credit card a few years ago. They like went to Best Buy and bought like 100 gift cards, and like I got that money all back, right? So like, there are avenues to do that in the traditional world. Now, in the crypto world, it kind of depends, right? So like if your money is lost on an exchange, like this kind of is like, okay, this is why you need to go to a good, reputable exchange, because like generally speaking, at least in the past, like sometimes like reputable players will come in to basically cover the losses from the consumer side, right? And this even goes to the most recent hack, the Wormhole hack. Actually, Jump Crypto, which is like a huge crypto trading firm, came in and basically like covered all of those losses. They covered like $250 million worth of losses, right? Because like Wormhole is backed by reputable backers or used by reputable people. And so like I think this like is a little bit of like how you should diligence like even what kind of crypto contracts and products you want to interact with. It's like it should, number one, first and foremost, be backed by or be done by reputable players.
So we basically traced out how in this interoperable, this bridge protocol, where the Wormhole protocol is bridging between Ethereum and Solana, and there was a bug in the underlying smart contract that a hacker exploited and managed to take away $250 million. I'm going to kind of repackage what you said here because I think it's such an important point. I want to say it twice. First off, I actually almost used the Wormhole bridge myself. I'm playing around on Solana, and I was like, oh, cool, I want to put some Ether over there. I didn't end up using Wormhole, but I almost did. And part of my consideration here was, well, there's actually a little bit of a network effect or like a reason why large protocols are maybe more secure, and it's because they have known backers behind them. So in the Wormhole case, it's backed by Jump Trading. It's backed by a few other venture investors. It's got a lot of institutional support behind it, if you will. And so I was like, well, if it does get hacked, there's a legitimate chance that these big players are going to be incentivized to cover it and make it whole. If I used some smaller, lesser known bridge, maybe some, earlier shop, there's a bit more risk there because they don't necessarily have institutional backing. And if something does go wrong, well, maybe nobody's left to hold the bag, right? Or cover your losses. What gives me strength though, is this Wormhole hack, it's one of actually many examples. Now they're not that frequent. I don't want to scare people, but I want to note that in all the cases where hacks have happened that are outside of your control, consumers have generally not been left holding the bag. It's happened a couple times, but in the vast majority of cases, the companies involved will end up covering the losses, which I think is indicative of the crypto industry coming together in a sort of self-aligned way and making sure that consumers are not going to get impacted by this because it's such an important thing. We need consumer protection. We need people to feel good about participating in these new, novel, innovative things. And that's been a thing. We actually haven't seen losses impact consumers.
So this is maybe a more crypto specific thing, but there have been cases where hackers have gotten away with the money and ended up returning it because if you remember, everything you do on crypto is logged on chain, right? So like through literal paper trails that you actually cannot cover because everything is done logged on the blockchain, people have actually figured out like who the hackers are and then they'll like send notes to it. And like one of the examples, and I don't remember even like which hack this was, but do you know what I'm talking about? There was like
I do remember
people
this.
like okay, so people figured out like who the hacker was and like down to like where they lived. And there's this like I don't know, like this like prime terrorist negotiation thing, which is that like you send food over to their house. And so actually this group of people like sent miso soup to this hacker's house. And basically as like we know you did it. Like I think on the note it was like please return the funds, like on the like receipt of the from the restaurant. And it ended up getting returned.
This is going to be a wild true crime podcast someday of like, oh, check out this story. These, bleeding edge crypto hackers managed to exploit a bug in a protocol and walk away with millions of dollars. But then guess what? Everything on the blockchain is transparent. And these vigilante investigators looked on the blockchain and sleuthed around, and guess what? They found the guy's house and sent him DoorDash soup, right? They DoorDash
Threatened
soup.
by way of miso soup.
Yeah, and said, yo, we know who you are, just ... like maybe you should return the funds. And guess what? The hacker returned the funds. Yeah. That's actually relatively common because that's not the only story. This happens actually again and again. And so interesting here that Jump Trading is covering losses on Wormhole as of the time we're talking about this. But I also wonder if the attacker is going to actually try to walk away with 250 million, because that's a lot of money to try to launder through the blockchain and avoid all the internet sleuths, right? Or the companies in this case that are looking at the blockchain very carefully and investigating this. Yeah.
And I really wouldn't like underestimate the wisdom of the crowd in these scenarios. Like, I don't know if this is like a joke among your friends, but like among my girlfriends, at least, we have this joke where like, you're trying to like, you meet someone, like maybe you're whatever, like you download a dating app, you're trying to figure out something about this person you're going on a date with, and all you have to go off is like a first name. And like, there's this joke among at least of my girlfriends that like, all I need is a first name and I can find everything down to their address and social and everything, because, there's just so much data out there. So like, but this is even more so in on-chain transactions, because everything was literally done on the blockchain and there is proof of every transaction you make.
Yep. This is the new 21st century of like cops and robbers. I love it. It's great.
Yeah. But just to make it more, bring it down, like, jokes aside, like, it sucks to get your money, like, to basically like find out that, you lost your money or like you lost your assets through something that's not your own fault. And I do think that this does point to still a pretty large gap in the crypto industry, is that like we are severely lacking in good insurance solutions, right? Like the US government, the FDIC, which insures your US dollars, unfortunately will not step in to insure your crypto assets. So I do think that leaves a pretty big gap in terms of like space we can still innovate on. And I think products people can still build, which is like crypto native insurance products.
Yeah. And just as a quick call out to the Around the Block website, where we actually did do some research on insurance protocols, because we recognize that, hey, this is actually a very important gap in the market today. And our ventures program has made investments in promising insurance protocols as well. So while we are a little bit early in the ecosystem, again, it's been 5 years of crypto DeFi and we've had hundreds of years of banking, right? Or 100 or whatever. We should expect insurance protocols to mature, evolve, and provide the level of consumer protection that the traditional banking industry enjoys today. It's just going to take some time, right? And maybe this is a good kind of time to segue to kind of what are our big takeaways. How do you and I, as more or less crypto experts, feel about the risks in crypto? What's your frame on it? How do you kind of process this internally?
There's a certain amount of risks that you have to assume when you're just interacting with money. Period. And this happens in crypto. This happens outside of crypto. Always be careful and like double check when it's in your control, right? Now, to the extent that it's outside of your control, there are still ways that you can like do your research, right? So for example, in the traditional world, store your money at a legitimate, reputable bank. In crypto land, store your money with a legitimate, reputable exchange. And if you're going to use a product, at least make sure it's backed by reputable people. And these are all like public information, right? So like it's a simple Google search that will probably yield those results, right? So like even doing basically the third simple step just to check like, hey, like I don't know how to read the code, but like, is this verified or like has this been done by an auditor? And like projects will usually, I mean, that's like a point of pride, right? So like they'll also announce that.
There are always kind of nuanced things here, right? Like if you're going to Google search a project, make sure that you're not following an advertisement, because scammers can make ads of phishing pages. Also auditing, yes, it's a very great signal, right? The best people in the world have looked at this and said, we don't see an exploit. That doesn't mean an exploit does not exist. Because in the case of the Wormhole hack, that was audited by a very premier firm. There still was an exploit. So these things, that's kind of why it's a little bit more rare to see a big hack like Wormhole, but it's still common sense you can take there. I agree with that approach. I'll also add kind of my general frame here. Every time there's a hack that happens in crypto, the industry learns from it. We figure out what went wrong. We update our common sense practices. The auditors get a little bit sharper, and the industry is hardened a bit more as a result. In the meantime, for you as a participant in the ecosystem, there are common sense things you can do. Make sure you're using good passwords. You're not sharing passwords. Make sure you're checking to see that the website hasn't been phished. You're not looking at some scammer's webpage. Don't trust random people on internet forums, right? And the last one in my head is if I am going to participate in DeFi, which I am, I want to make sure that I'm using protocols that have been very well vetted, that have backers that are very large, institutional size backers, right? So there's a bit of a thing there where you want to trust the bigger players in the space. It's a little bit more of a push that direction.
That was a good plug.
I don't want it to be Coinbase chilly. I really don't. But Coinbase, we are one of the biggest players in the space. There's many others that I would trust too, by the way. Like it's not just Coinbase, but it is a bit of a reason for me to make sure that, hey, there's a bit more protection if I'm using bigger, suppliers, bigger companies.
I think the bigger takeaway is that all hope is not lost. Like with every
100%.
exploit, like people learn their lessons, both on the user behavior side and also on the technical side, right? And so I think there are risks. It is scary, but it's not as scary if you're informed. And I think it shouldn't detract you from learning more about the industry or wanting to come into work through the industry, or losing faith in participating in the industry, because I do think that there's a lot of benefits to be had by just participating in the crypto ecosystem.
Maybe I'll ask you, are you still going to play around in DeFi and mess around with all this stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm still going to be joining Discords. I just might ignore random DMs from now, or just do my homework better. But 100%, I think this is my rare optimistic side, which is that I don't think all hope is lost. And even though I've been fished, and even though I've done maybe embarrassing things that I guess I will tell on air, it doesn't detract from me participating.
I, for one, like optimistic Catherine. I want to see more of it. And of course,
don't hang on to that hope, because this is a rare glimpse. But
hey, it speaks to how excited you are about crypto, right? You're definitely not deterred by the hacks or events that happen here. Neither am I. Just a little bit of common sense goes a long way. And I am so bullish that what happens in crypto is going to be so innovative and bring so much good to the world that it's going to outweigh all of these challenges and rough edges that we're going to see getting there.
Okay, well, that's a step too optimistic.
Okay, well,
whatever. All right, I wouldn't go as far as saying world changing, but okay. I
can back away from world changing. All right, fine, but it's still very, very promising, and I'm excited about it.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
although it could be world changing, I will maintain that there's a very real possibility it ends up world changing. Yeah.
I will let you have that. Okay. Okay. Noted. Well, anyways, I hope this was informative to everybody. I hope that this helps you think about risk in crypto. I hope it helps you think about the types of risk in crypto. And I really hope that Justin and I had walked through steps that you can take to feel more comfortable about participating within crypto. And know that, whether it's in the real world or in the crypto world, there are risks everywhere. It's just about how you want to de-risk it.
I'm also excited that I can give this episode to my mom, and hopefully she can feel a little bit better about stuff, because I get pings all the time. Oh my God, this happened. What do you think about it? And I'm like, yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Take the bigger picture. Think about, all the things that are really happening here, all this stuff, right? So hopefully my mom can be a little bit assured as well.
Yeah. And every week we ask, what are your questions? What haven't we covered? Do you feel better about managing risk in crypto? Let us know. Tweet at us, leave us a comment, give us a rating. We're all ears.
I'd say that's a wrap for this edition of the Around the Block podcast from Coinbase. So thanks for tuning in. Be sure to listen and subscribe wherever you find your podcasts. And we also have a landing page, www.coinbase.com/aroundtheblock. You'll see all of our prior episodes and long form research. Check out that insurance piece we wrote. We talked about it.
And we'll see you guys next week.
All right. Take care.
Today's conversation is for informational purposes only and does not constitute legal or investment advice. Actual results may vary materially from any forward-looking statements made and are subject to risks and uncertainties.